part of the Greenlit Podcast Network.
This Father's Day, let Dad loose at Lowe's and help get his hands on the perfect tools for dad-worthy projects like the Metabo HPT 18-volt line. He'll love a brushless cordless drill or impact driver for $79 or a 4-piece combo kit for $249. With a lightweight, compact design, these tools go where others can't fit. Dad can shop at Lowe's in-store, online, or through our app. Lowe's, the perfect gift for Dad. Valid through 6/24, U.S. only.
From high above 1st Street South in the sizzling city of Minneapolis, this is Nice Games Club, the show where nice game devs talk gaming and game development. I'm Ellen Burns-Johnson, and I make nice games.
I'm Stephen McGregor, and I make nice games.
And I'm Arthur Croy. I too make nice games.
For this week's episode, our topics are storytelling and exploits. And so, if everyone is ready, let's start.
One thing I like about us being in the same room together, which is still brand new to us,
Yes.
having forgotten everything from the before times, is that we're much more tight in that opening when we each say who we are and what we do.
Yeah.
When we're on Discord, like, I think you've all experienced this, like the delay happens and you're like, wait, why isn't the next person going? Oh,
Right.
because they haven't heard me finish speaking yet.
Yeah.
And it's really just even when it's good, it's like a half a second or whatever. It's like still kind of rough. It's nice to be so connected.
You are saying that on our second take of the intro after
Listeners
we
don't have to know that.
into giggles.
There were no giggles, listeners. We've been doing this
No. We're
professionally, always.
We know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a promise.
Okay.
Steven, what's happening right now?
E3 is
Right
happening
now?
right now. Literally at this moment. As we record these words, E3 is doing things.
Yeah. We've talked about it on the show before, but like I really enjoy the press conference nonsense. Like it's just it's just fun. I know it's phony and whatever. And I definitely, I don't like NDAs and secrets. Listeners know that, but I do love like trailers and reveals and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm all day because we've been doing the show, and we have been, doing show meetings and stuff today while the Xbox conference is going on.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going to look at Twitter because like I'll see it, as a show in the way that they intend when they're.
I haven't had the restraint.
No. Well, listeners know already. Spoil it for me. What happened?
I mean, I haven't been fully paying attention to it because
Steven, give me all the details.
You want me to record a podcast and watch E3? It's too much.
Uh-huh.
Multitasking isn't real.
Well,
Mark.
what got your attention?
Okay,
anyway?
so the main thing is Bethesda's new that Starfield. I don't remember if it's Starfield. That space game that they're working on. Yeah, it's supposed to be out late next year.
Mm-hmm.
November, I think.
Yeah.
So that's pretty big because I think they've been working on that for a long time.
Putting a date on it is something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which means it's not an Elder Scrolls game, and that's what I want. But
They're working on the next one, aren't they?
that's what they said. There was a little trailer, and there were mountains, and that's all we're supposed to know about Elder Scrolls 6.
Steven is not satisfied.
No, I want to know what the next game is so I can mod the heck out of it because I know the gameplay is going to be trash.
We already knew there were going to be mountains. Come on, Bethesda.
I know. Jeez, that doesn't tell me anything.
Next thing they're going to say is they're going to be swords.
Right. What? I'm shocked.
Well, I'm interested.
Well, that makes one of us. No, I want to know what the game is about. There are other things that are happening too. Y'all probably know more than we do at this moment. So just look it up.
Mm-hmm.
We might have a link or something.
Yeah. I think it's fun. Like, I don't take any of it seriously, but I do sort of just enjoy it. It's kind of...
Yeah, I used to enjoy it a lot more when I was growing up. I don't enjoy it as much anymore. I mostly watch Nintendo's things.
You probably took it more seriously when you were growing up.
That's true. I probably did.
You've become immune to hype in your older age.
Yeah, you have to develop that kind of like, just like treat it like, you can't take it at face value because it's preposterous, like how seriously they take the things. None of their release dates they announce are like, I'm not going to hold anyone to any of those. Yeah. Like,
things get delayed.
I'm going to skip the various racing games that I'm not interested in.
Yeah.
Or whichever military shooter.
Yeah,
like
Just Dance was announced, shocker.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a big deal because wasn't Just Dance very much tied to all the motion control stuff?
Actually, I
a lot
think
of that left.
the new Just Dance is not going to be on the Wii, so that is kind of big news because it's been on the Wii forever. And now it is not.
Oh,
but it will be on
Stadia. That's a really fun fact about Just Dance is if you search for, like, maybe, I guess it was 2 years ago or whatever, when the last Just Dance for the Wii came out. It was the last Wii game ever. Somebody wrote an article about it, And we talked about it on the show. And so we got cited in this article.
Oh.
And this was like no one had ever cited us for anything.
Yeah.
And so if you search for like on Google for Nice Games Club in the news tab, it just shows up this one article about Just Dance.
Wow.
That's how much competition there was for talking about Just Dance at that time.
That's pretty good.
Speaking of being an antidote to hype, there's that story from Mark.
Okay. So there's other news as well. Yeah. We talked about it, or rather, I sneakily edited in a mention of it in last week's episode. Our friend Chell Wong, who was a guest on the show a while back and pal of the show, she has a thing she does every year for Able Gamers, which is to get a bunch of video game composers, have them write original music during the month of February, I think is when it is every year, and then put out a record, and then proceeds go to Able Gamers. And she did it again this year, but oh man, the response was something. There was 54 composers who contributed music, and so it became a double album. And the theme for the jam, if you want to call it that, was dreams. And so it's a double album, Awake and Asleep, which is very, very fun because the theme was thought up before it was decided to split, and it was still perfect. So very cool. The album art is gorgeous, and Chell shepherded this project bigger than the previous ones. And I have a piece of music on there. I wrote something for it. Awesome. So which is like, I've written music. Wrote music for Nice Games Club, but it's not something I really do for other people generally. And so, or for its own sake, in fact. So it was a really fun experience for me and for a good cause. So that's on sale now. We'll have the link in the show notes, but you can just search Charity EP Jam. That's the name of the project. And then this year's album is called Dreams. So give that a go.
Yeah. Speaking of good news and good causes, the Palestinian aid bundle ended recently, a couple of days ago.
Yeah. Yesterday? From where we're sitting, it was just the other day.
Yeah.
It'll be a week or two since when you're listening to it. But it was a big success.
Right. Yeah. What was it? $900,000?
$902 something and change.
Yeah. So much money.
It was a ton of money. Yeah. And again, another friend of the show, Alana Linaire, put that together.
Yeah.
I am so proud of her. Like, it just started as this little thing. And I was like, oh, hey, we'll put Widget Satchel in there. That sounds great. And then like a couple of days later, she's like, okay. A lot of people are interested. And it ended up being over 1,000 games. And at the end, a couple of big heavy hitters like Celeste and Minute, the big, indie heavy hitters. A lot of them were in last year's Racial Justice Bundle as well. Mm-hmm. And this is another opportunity. One, if you missed out on that one, to get a hold of these games. Yeah. But for also a very good cause.
Right.
Raised a ton of money. So that's really exciting.
That's very good. Mm-hmm. And then Ellen, I heard that the Serious Play Conference is back.
Yeah. Well, they've been doing it annually for a while now. And since it got on my radar, I've been trying to go in person.
Yeah.
And usually the thing that got in the way of that was work scheduling, because just like the nature of my job, things change or at least did change very fast. And that made scheduling something like this really difficult. Mm-hmm. Then I went contracting, but there was COVID.
Right.
So we weren't really able to do that in person. And they're doing it online again this year, which I think is smart. But I am going to volunteer this year.
Ooh.
And that's going to be cool. I would have much preferred to volunteer in person because I like seeing people in person.
Plus, they give you like a t-shirt, right?
Probably. I don't know if they're going to give me they're not going to give me a t-shirt. The point is I'm going to be able to see a whole bunch of stuff. And then if you're a participant or if you're a volunteer, you're going to get links to all the videos for all the different tracks. But they have just so much good stuff. Like they have like 2 or 3 days worth of material for the regular conference and then like pre and post conference stuff. And then they have they're going to have videos for all the different sessions, and they have like 5 tracks worth of sessions. And when I say track, they have like a different focus. There's like an entire track that's like K through 12 games for learning, and games for learning in higher education, and games for learning in like corporate. And there's a design track, I think. And there's the healthcare track. And so I'm going to be volunteering with the healthcare track and helping to manage the session recordings and upload them and get them all nicely edited for people to look at down the road. And I'm really excited because I know generally how simulations and games are being used in healthcare, but there are a few different sides to that within healthcare, right? Sometimes games can be used to train healthcare professionals, but there are also therapeutic games, which we talked about a couple weeks ago with Adam Davis.
Yeah.
And there are also, it's not just like mental health care, but also games that have been used to like help burn victims manage their pain. You know, there's tons of cool stuff. And I'm not really plugged into that scene because I don't work in healthcare. I'm really looking forward to working the conference and learning a whole bunch.
That's great. Like, it's you contributing your time, but also you're gonna get a lot out of it. Like in an area that you have a particular interest in, but not a lot of exposure to. That's so fantastic.
Yeah, it's really cool. That's coming up, I think, before the end of the month, and I'll talk about it here, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll have links in the show notes for that stuff too. I think this episode will be out before then, right?
Yeah, it might be the week of, but yeah.
So listen, if you're hearing this now, check that link.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've gone on long enough. I just want to chat with you guys all day. Now that we're actually here, like, I don't want to get into the topics. Just want, like, what else is new with you?
Skip the topics.
Yeah.
No,
but no, that's what that's what why people are here. So,
well, it makes sense because people really like telling stories.
Yeah,
and listening to stories.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk more about that.
Well done. Excellent. A+ transition. My topic is storytelling. It's a pretty big topic. I wanted to have like a better title for it, a better name for it, but like putting in the outline, like, no, that's kind of just what it is, storytelling. And so I wanted to talk about just the sort of broad ways that games tell stories. And it's not, I think a lot of people kind of like, oh, I think I understand. But I want to walk through a little bit of them and kind of what's useful about it. And also when you think about the games of your own that you make, which approaches you take and identifying which of those approaches. Because I think a lot of times we kind of just do it, right? Yeah. Unless you're making like a visual novel that's specifically a story game. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we don't do a lot of thinking in terms of like how we categorize the work that we do in that. And I think that's okay, actually. I think there's probably maybe fair disagreement on that point, how much you should be planning out various aspects of your game. But I think it might be helpful to have a little bit of a framing. So that's what I'm going to try to do here.
Yeah.
So the first thing is just like games as a medium for stories.
Yeah.
So this is the visual novel approach, right? This is something that like a lot of indie games will be story first. And so they will be light on gameplay or not terribly innovative on gameplay by design.
Sorry, not to disagree with you, because you're right. This is the focus of like how visual novels work and things. But I think that there is some innovation in some, like you can make some interesting gameplay through the medium of
No, I don't disagree. Yeah. I mean that generally the games in this category that I'm talking about, yes. I'm not saying all visual novels.
Oh, yeah.
I do think most visual novels.
Sure.
But I think it's fair to disagree with me on that. That the purpose of the gameplay is to tell the story.
Oh, yeah, I agree completely.
And the gameplay, it can be, but also it doesn't put a lot of demands on the gameplay. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to make a game. I don't think that makes the gameplay lesser than.
Yeah.
A good example of this is Grease. Did either of you play Grease?
No.
It's a platformer that has this amazing hand-drawn art style, and it sort of tells this story of loss and grief that kind of slowly reveals to you what it's about. It's a little bit mysterious. And so you kind of go in thinking like, oh, this is beautiful. And then later on you go like, oh, I know what story's been being told to me. Meanwhile, the gameplay is pretty basic platforming. I would almost call it like uninspired in a way. But that's not the point of it. And I think that it would be restrictive to audiences if it focused more on gameplay. Now, there are other types of games, and we'll talk about those, where those things are more in tandem. But I think that's kind of the point I want to make in this topic is like, sometimes we talk about like the best way to combine these things.
Yeah.
But I think it's perfectly okay to focus on one over the other because one matters more to you as a designer, or one is going to matter more to your audience. And I think there's a lot of examples of that where like a visual novel could also be a full motion video game. Where, you know what I mean? Where you have a performed cast and then you choose options. Right?
Oh yeah,
that's another way to do that mechanic.
An example of that you're describing here would be like Her Story or the pseudo spiritual sequel. What's the name of the game? I can't remember it. We'll put it in the show. You like search through a database of full motion videos effectively to come to your own conclusions about what the story is.
Right.
So
I would argue that falls a little bit more into my second category.
Oh, okay.
Which is, and it might not be second on my list, but it's the second one we're going to talk about, which is games where the mechanics are central to telling the story.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think when you talk about a visual novel, that's true of a visual novel, I think. But I would say, and this is maybe splitting hairs, but I think a game like Her Story, the mechanic is such that you could watch a YouTube video like a YouTube playthrough of a visual novel.
Yeah.
And the story wouldn't feel that much different. Now, the gameplay would be different. Your experience would definitely be different.
Sure.
And there would be something lost from that.
Right.
But in a case of her story, so much of the way you experience the story is through those mechanics.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I would put that, but these are fuzzy categories.
No, I
agree kind of know what you're going for because it's still, story is still principle. That's why the game exists.
Yeah.
Like the gameplay is interesting and innovative, but it's not as important. So it still fits, I guess. But it makes it hard to categorize.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Like the game design is meant for, it helps you tell that story. And it's not really that like there's a story being told and you're like a part of it. It's that you are the one telling and exploring the story in a weird way. Does that? I don't know how much sense that makes, but you know.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Somebody put To the Moon on the list of examples.
Oh, I put that on there.
I love that game.
Yeah, To the Moon. Have you played it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like one of the few games that I've nearly teared up at.
Yeah, I cried myself to dehydration. So
wow. I gotta play this game.
Yeah, it's really good. So it's made by it's an RPG Maker game.
Mm-hmm.
And basically you just play as like these two. Oh boy, it's been a long time since I played it. I hope I remember correctly. You play as these two scientists who like use this device to go through the memories of this older person, who's I think dying of cancer or something. You get a better sense of because this person wanted to. Do you remember, Ellen, what it is?
They were, I think if I remember correctly, which is also a big if, they were going through the memories to try to figure out like how they wanted to construct those last moments of this person's life.
Yeah.
And they were going to like simulate something that they really wanted, but weren't able to achieve in life or something like that.
That's right. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so as you like explore these memories, you get to have a better sense of who this person was, through their life and what they experienced. And like, there's a bunch of things that are revealed and things that are very sad and cathartic in some ways. And it's really good.
Bittersweet game.
Yeah, it's a bittersweet game.
Just watching you describe it with like a big smile on your face, like because it does seem deeply impactful, but you just seem so happy that it exists.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It was really good.
Love games
really
like
good.
that.
Yeah,
it just takes a couple hours to play. Like
it's pretty short too.
Yeah.
So,
cool. Yeah, and that's key to this sort of category, right? Is like the story is so vital and important. That's the thing that matters most. And so the mechanics can sometimes get in the way of that. You need something interesting, a way to tell it with the mechanics, right? And that could be novel or it could be something you've seen a million times before. It has to eventually be something that gets out of your way.
Yeah.
So that the story can be told.
Yeah.
Right? Is that described To the Moon pretty well?
Yeah, like I think a lot of the mechanics, most of it is just it's kind of like a visual novel in that you just kind of move to new places and do things.
Yeah.
But like there are some gamey things in there that you have to like solve some puzzles. The puzzles are relatively easy. You're not punished for like looking up hints or whatever to get through them.
Sure.
And they're not super relevant to the story.
Yeah.
So they're kind of just like I think they like mostly break up the story for the player. Gives them something to do while they're like, I don't know, reminiscing on whatever.
And that has utility in the that makes that kind of story easier to tell.
Yeah.
It's why it's a game and not another type of medium. Because I think it's easy to say like, oh, well, if the gameplay is not as important, then why is it a game at all?
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's important. It's just not the most important thing.
Yeah.
And I think that we do speak in superlatives a lot as designers. Like, what's the best, most efficient, like most user-friendly, like way to do this or that.
Yeah.
Right.
But sometimes you have to say like, no, you actually just categorize or prioritize. The different things you're going to do. It doesn't mean that they're not important.
You bring up a good point too, because like I think that part of the things that makes video games different from like other forms of media is that like the player is in control of the pacing of things for the most part. And so like it might make some stories easier to tell because like they can approach it in a way that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
Like I know there are some movies that are really good, but they're like really hard watches because like it's just like 2 hours of intense things happening the whole time.
Tenet.
Or or it's just like kind of slow or something. I don't know. There's a bunch of different ways you can approach movies too.
Tenet also pretty slow.
Both accurate statements, yes. And so like with video games, like the player has control over that to some extent.
Yeah.
And so they can speed it up or slow it down to better approach how they are able to take this.
And on the flip side, there's also certain types of stories that would be poorly told as in gameplay form, right? That's sometimes difficult because sometimes the story you want to tell is not, it's like, oh, but this would be kind of just better as a long cutscene in my game rather than as a part of my game.
Yeah.
And then you have to like decide, well, my game isn't really set up for long cutscenes. Maybe it should be. And like everything's connected to everything, as always, right?
Yeah.
It always comes back to that in the end.
Yep.
One of the things I think before we move on to the next full category here is to talk about games that have a lot of story but are not this. So I think a lot about like Western RPGs, like games like The Witcher, or even Mass Effect, which is, you know, has lots of lore, but I don't, and might be the most important thing to a lot of people. It might be the thing they remember the most. In those cases, those games are meant to be, those are action games that are meant to be played as action games. The story is, it's vital and it's important, but I wouldn't say that it would fall in this category. Does that make sense? Like, it's like games that have lots of story don't always mean that they are the ones that where the story is the most important.
Yes.
Even if it's important that they have a lot of story.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense to me because, especially with Mass Effect, because there's a whole lot of like background stuff and things you don't really need to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to. It's really what makes that game special in a lot of ways. The play of Mass Effect is more important. Yeah, it's more important to play the game. In the mechanics. And so again, just like it has nothing to do with how much or how little story there is. Yeah, right. Like, you know, haikus exist, right? They can be powerful, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the thing that you were touching on, games where the mechanics are sort of central to the telling. Yeah. And I think that's something that we kind of all we strive for, and we've talked about in this show. Like, that's kind of like a goal. Like, that's what games should be. Yeah. And I don't know if I've mellowed on that, or I've just have a more nuanced or like just thought about it more. Sure. But I think I'm less wanting to promote that to people is the best way to make games. Okay. Even though I kind of want my games to do that. Yeah. Yeah. You know?
What do you think has changed?
I think it's just a greater appreciation for other ways of doing it. Okay. If that makes sense.
That's fair.
When mechanics are in a way that is how the story is told, where it's vital to the telling. And that's something that I think only games can do. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that that's what all games should do.
Sure. I agree with that very much so. Yeah. But I guess I have noticed that, like, when I'm playing a game where like the mechanics and the narrative are fairly unrelated, I become less interested in either the game or either the mechanics of the game or the story of the game. Yeah. So like, I'm still, gung ho, put them together. Maybe so I have to care about them both.
Well, maybe it's a case. Well, because I do agree with you there. Yeah. Maybe it's a case of like, make sure they're not at odds. Yeah. And that every game should do. Yes. Yeah. But maybe once they're not at odds, then you should be free to decide how they interrelate, if that makes sense.
I think that's good.
The examples I thought of this were actually maybe not quite ones you'd expect, but like Hades is a good example of this. Where like that game makes a roguelike make sense. Like, it's the only roguelike that actually tracks, basically, right? Because it uses the mechanics of a roguelike in a way that story couldn't be told in any other gameplay genre. Yeah. Because of the way you feel. And once you get to the end, but it's not the end. And what were you even fighting for? And the fact that you can develop relationships with characters sort of in a repetitive fashion that only works in this genre. It's a genre I do not like, but like I have so much admiration for how those things are put together. Yeah. And I think a lot of people love the story and the setting and the lore. And some players like that more than they like the gameplay, or they like it in spite of the gameplay they're not normally into. Other people are not into the story, but they like it because it feels like a real balance in a way that one can't be extracted from the other without making it destroying the whole game. Basically.
Yeah. I think Hades is a good example of that. I think that does make a lot of sense. I was having a hard time thinking of games that tied like mechanics and story together in that way. Yeah. That felt like, inseparable.
I will say, I mean, it's one of the things that I know that I was trying to do with Widget Satchel, which was, it's certainly, I wouldn't call it a grand example of this, but it's something that went into a lot of my thinking when doing a lot of the lore writing in that game. Yeah. About how, certainly at the end of the game, when you decide whether to escape or to go back, I want the player's motivations to be driven by the story, not by what is more interesting mechanically, but giving them that option and sort of like reframing it was sort of important to me. The idea that like Sprocket is knocking crap around and causing trouble, but at no point are you meant as a player to feel like you're breaking anything really. Yeah. Like, even though you are blowing things up. Yeah. And that works because the story and the mechanics go together. The success of that is up to the player. Like I said, but it's something I was definitely thinking about when tying that stuff together. But because we all worked on that, it wasn't maybe as single-minded as it might have been in another case. But
you worked on the choice thing. Like, I don't think we had much hand in that. No, but you talking about.
But I mean, like the sort of the weight mechanic and the level design and stuff that we all worked on as a team. That was something independent of this kind of angle on it. But I wrote all the story for the game, and so I wanted to make sure that the story was driven by the mechanics, and that the mechanics determined what the story could be, and what couldn't be said in the story. Yeah, that was important to me, and I think that's something that maybe it was just in service of not having them fight each other. That thing that you're saying that a game shouldn't have. Another example, I think, another indie game is Bugsnax. Did either of you play Bugsnax?
No, you're going to have to explain this one to me.
Actually, I can't because
oh no!
In order to describe how fully connected the mechanics and the story of Bugsnax are, because really, the first time you pick up the controller, does not make any sense that they have anything to do with each other. It's like, this is a cute island, this is a fun story, these are adorable characters, these mechanics have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
But the game does conclude. This might not be fair because it's not. You just have to trust me, dear listener, unless you play it. It's a bit spoilery to reveal a lot of the tie-in, but it's not that it's a huge twist or anything. It's more like a dawning realization.
Sure.
But it's very clever in that the story cannot be told if not for the way the mechanics make the player feel engaging with them. Which is really interesting because it's a pretty light experience.
Yeah,
and that's why I wanted to use this example and Hades also, because they're not ones that would come to mind immediately, right? Because this isn't always about telling the biggest story or about having the most unique mechanics. It's about just mixing them up in a jar together, I guess.
Yeah,
right.
Synergy.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, Hades is a good example of this too, because like Supergiant kind of has been making the same game for years, and I'm not saying that as a slight, and I think that that's great,
right?
Because like they're just refining on their that game, but because they've been doing that, they have an understanding of what that game can do and what stories they can tell through that game. So they were able to create Hades due to all of that experience.
Yeah,
and so even with Bastion, they did have a focus on narrative in that all the actions you take, the narrator would, comment on it or something. Oh, the boy fell down the well or whatever.
Yeah.
And so like that, I think that like all of that experience, they were able to bring that into Hades.
Yeah.
As we have tried to strive for that kind of thing, I think we just need to get more practice at it as developers. I'm kind of talking about it for myself too.
Yeah.
Like we just have to you just have to do it a lot, and then you get better at it, and then eventually you make.
Yeah. That's a great example because I didn't play a lot of Pyre, so I might not being fair, but the little of Pyre I played felt like they didn't do a great job of it there. It was more like the mechanics fit the setting, but not the story.
Well, and that's a good example too, because Pyre is the one game that they've made that's quite different from the other games.
It's kind of a black sheep compared to the other ones.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at Hades and you can see the genealogy, and you can see, I think, elements of the design of Pyre that came through. So it's clear that they learned some things that they liked in making Pyre that they then also adapted into Hades. But Pyre played really differently than every other Supergiant game I've played. And I think I've played them all at this point. So Dog was cute though.
The one other example that I have to touch on is Hypnospace Outlaw. Which I mentioned because I'm working on with that team on their next project now. So I played through the whole thing again to get a sense for a lot of the frameworks and systems that they're working with. Cool. And just thinking about, man, I was on the internet in the late 90s. Yeah. So and just the way that game tells its story by having the versions of the web pages you visit change based on actions that happen in the game, and the way that you don't always know what happened because these are basically the personal homepages of characters whose lives you will never know. You'll only see the way that they present it in there. And so you can see who's the unreliable narrator and all these little mini stories, but then everyone's swept up in larger events that they all react to.
Yeah.
And that can only be told in that way.
Yeah.
I just wanted to shout that out. I'm working with that team now, so I'm a little bit motivated there. So last category I want to talk about is the this is a place kind of thing where you build lore, right? One of the things that there's a Star Trek podcast I listen to that says a lot that Star Trek is a place. You can tell any kind of story with any type of character because the world exists for you to populate with it. That's what makes Star Trek, I think, better than other kinds of science fiction universes, where other science fiction universes, the main plot of the Skywalker saga or whatever is like so central to anything that happens there, which isn't to say that there isn't a million other stories, but it still all comes back to that. this is true of lots of other things. And I only bring up the Star Trek example, Stephen, to get us as an example, because a lot of video games are like this. Mario is like this. Mario, the Mushroom Kingdom is a place.
Yeah.
Right? You can race carts. You can do whatever.
Yeah.
You can Smash Brothers. You can do it, and you can rescue the princess, and you can rescue somebody else as the princess. Like it's all setting, right? And that Mario does not have a very robust lore, but it still is a place. But other systems like the Zelda, anything that has a lot of lore, where the games themselves, the new installment can be anything. That's really exciting. And that's very different from the tying those things together so much. Is to have something that is a place. And I think that's a really powerful thing, because you can have a game that can have lots of different frameworks, a game that can change over time. It can be an action game that also has late stage puzzles.
Sure.
Because the mechanics are not so tied to the story that would be weird.
Yeah,
right?
I think that makes sense. But I mean, to talk about Star Trek, I guess a bit more. Like,
I was giving you an out, but go ahead.
No, like, well, what Star Trek does is it uses its place to, like, describe things. They're trying to tell a story, or at least they're trying to, like, use this as a metaphor so people,
Yeah, it has a founding principle.
Yeah. But not just a founding principle, but just like they're trying to say something about stuff. And I mean, like, Mario and Zelda, Mario games aren't really trying to say things about stuff, and that's fine, I guess. But like,
okay.
But I mean, I'm saying they're not using the place to tell a story in those kinds of examples.
I didn't even think about it that way.
Okay,
I was thinking more of just like this is the quality of this that works for it.
It is a quality,
but I mean that's the thing I like most about Star Trek is that it does that in the service of a point.
Right.
Mario doesn't do that. You're right.
Yeah. Oh boy, I just defended Star Trek on the podcast.
I mean,
it's recorded. Yeah. It's recorded.
But no, that's really interesting because maybe that's what would bring one of these kinds of franchises forward, right? So Assassin's Creed is turned into this.
Yeah.
Where Assassin's Creed is a place because every game is just wildly different now.
Yeah.
It didn't used to be that way.
Right.
A lot of the mechanics of Assassin's Creed are more tied into how the story was told. That's less true now. That's fine. But the thing it is missing that it did used to have was a point.
Right.
So maybe that's something that could really I don't know. What are good examples, if we can think of any, of games that have set, and this is usually true of franchises, right? That have multiple entries.
They would be, Japanese RPGs are probably closer to what we're looking for here. Because like Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Those games.
Right. And each one of them is its own place.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And they use like similar things to tie, like there's Chocobo in all of the Final Fantasy games, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
So like,
I just meant that's an example where the lore doesn't have to cross from installment to installment.
Exactly.
You can just take Final Fantasy 15 all by itself and say that's a place.
Yeah. And so like, I think those kinds of familiarities tie people back into each of the games.
Yes.
So like you played Final Fantasy 4, you can go to Final Fantasy 9 and go, oh, I remember this thing. So, but like, they tell different narratives, they tell different stories. There's a purpose for why that place is the way that place is. And it allows them to tell a story. I think a lot of JRPGs probably are decent examples of, taking a place and making it a narrative. Right.
And probably some of them veer a little bit closer to the story as paramount, and some of them veer a little bit closer to like the story drives the mechanics, but I think it's probably more true of most of them that they are settings.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what drives a lot of that genre. That's interesting. Well, that's pretty much my categories. I'm sure I missed a couple of sort of big things. The only other really topic here is like how endings are done in games.
Oh, yeah.
Like how player choice was in there, but that feels like a whole other topic.
That is I'm putting that down as a future topic.
Yeah.
Because that's a good topic.
I just couldn't stop thinking about it, like how these different types of games, how the stories are told. Like the endings are really important to that. And even just like variations in how they play out. It doesn't always have to be the ending that's different or whatever.
Yeah.
But how does that mean to how you... Yep, let's save that for another time.
Yes.
Before we wrap this up, I do want to mention Dark Souls, potentially,
as
a series that fits into that last category, because I would be remiss not to mention it. And also, I will hear from Eric if I don't. Because he loves that series. And so do I. I beat the boss really easily, the first one, and then I didn't the rest of it because it was really hard. And I don't have the patience for it. But I do like to rub that in his face a little bit. I can't really articulate why I think it fits well in that category, but I mean, it is an extended narrative, and I think at least the Dark Souls games all occur in the same world.
Yeah.
At different times, and they all together have a point. So that's what came to mind as you were describing that.
Sure. Yeah.
And tons of lore. Tons of juicy lore.
Yeah. There's like a sort of a standoffishness from the storytelling in those games, and I haven't played them, so this is mostly just from what I've heard, is that they exist, they surround you as you play, but they're not part of the play necessarily. Am I describing that correctly? Like, but they're important. But like Dark Souls, those mechanics wouldn't work if it weren't for the place.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that the place makes those mechanics make sense.
Yeah.
And the story that you have to glean from your interaction with the environment is what gives meaning to those mechanics. And that, I think, relates to the metaphysical thesis of the whole series. Right. So maybe it doesn't fit well in your last category, but... Well,
it elevates it past like an arcade series.
Yeah.
Right? And so that sense of place is the important dimension of it. So I would say so. I mean, having, again, not an experience playing those games, but just the way you've described it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Those games are too scary, so I stopped playing them.
Yeah, fire spiders are pretty freaky.
Speaking of scary things.
Fire spiders?
Fire spiders.
Uh-huh.
We haven't talked about spiders on the show. That'd be an interesting topic that no one would be interested
Spiders in games?
Yeah, I don't know.
The lowest listener count for any episode.
Actually, that sounds like a PAX panel. That sounds
yeah, that'd be fun.
I would definitely go to that PAX panel.
Well, you know what? We've got a PAX panel worth of content on our website.
Ooh.
Yeah, see how I
expertly segued.
Thanks.
Love it.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of past episodes. We talked about narrative design with Beth Korf once before. Ellen, you've got a huge list of things that are relevant to the topics we're talking about.
Yeah, I was digging through our archives on the website, which is easy to navigate, and I came up with just tons of different episodes where we've talked about something with narrative design, or so on and so forth. So, like, one of the most recent examples, narrative design with Beth Korf, and we talked about character dialogue, I think, and that might be interesting. We talked about that with Felix a long time ago. I don't think I was on that episode. It's before my time, in the olden days. Adio was on. We talked about interactive fiction at one point.
Yeah.
So
you've talked about interactive fiction a couple of times.
A bunch of times.
Yeah.
And the way you can find all these like related topics is you go to an episode you like, and each topic has categories attached to them. You click that link. Takes you to every time we've ever talked about that category on the show. Going all the way back to the beginning. That's a really fun way for us as well to be able to research topics going forward. So it's been a resource to us. So imagine what it can be for you.
You should check all those episodes out.
nicegames.club.
This Father's Day, let Dad loose at Lowe's. We have just what he needs for instant bragging rights. The Greenworks electric pressure washer. It's got the right power he needs to get everything looking like new, from patio furniture to siding to the driveway. Plus, it starts fast with the touch of a button. And the best part? Dad can shop at Lowe's in-store, online, or through our app. Lowe's, the perfect gift for Dad. U.S. only.
Hey there, this is Jeremy Parrish, and if you're a fan of classic video game soundtracks, or if you just love 20-minute rock epics about war-ready armadillos that battle Catholicism, you should listen to Alexander's Ragtime Band. Join the power trio of myself, Elliot Long, and James Eldred each month as we talk about the most pretentious music of all, progressive rock, right here on the Greenlit Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Ray, and this is my friend Alex.
Hi.
And we do a show called No More Whoppers.
We're not brothers, but we do have a graphic novel about our D&D campaign.
If you can escape us, you deserve to be free.
No More Whoppers is the animality of podcasts.
Join us every month or so on the Greenlit Podcast Network.
I don't have a good transition.
Okay, give me a second.
Just cheat your way through it. It's okay.
Oh my gosh, that was so good. That was so good.
It would be good if exploits and cheats weren't. Well, no, they are kind of... Okay, it's good. It's a good one.
Wait, are they different?
Yeah, well...
Enlighten us. I guess that's what you're here for.
That's part of the conversation. We're going to discuss that. We're going to determine whether or not it's cheating or not.
Well, I'm leaning in. Now I'm very intrigued.
Wait, real quick. What's this topic?
Exploit.
Okay.
It's not cheating. We should maybe... Do we do a topic on cheating before it cheats, or... That's a separate thing. We'll talk about that separately.
I seem to remember we're all okay with people cheating.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Evil Games Club did cheating.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
That's funny.
You can find that on the archives by going to nicegames.club. I thought we were done with this part of the episode.
No.
Okay.
Never. Yeah, okay. So, yes, exploits are my topic. And I guess I want to describe what an exploit is and differentiate it from other things that are kind of related to exploits but are not exploits.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think exploits are related to cheating in that one could argue that exploits are cheating, but I would argue they're not because there's things that are like meant to be in the game.
Uh-huh.
But the exploits are different from glitches in that an exploit is the thing that is intentionally put in by the developers, but like can be exploited. I can't come up with a better word.
Whoa, hold on. I've never heard it described that way.
Okay.
I've always heard exploits is taking advantage of glitches, and it may or may not have been sneakily put in by a developer, but isn't always.
Okay.
I must be just thinking of it in a different. I'm thinking of like speedrunning definition.
You might not be. I am approaching it from a perspective fighting games, and so that's probably why.
I see.
And so like I think that like exploits.
Exploiting an opportunity,
yes,
less than exploiting a vulnerability.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's actually
right.
That's a good way of describing it. So yeah, the way I see exploits is an exploit is like a thing that was intentionally put into the game by the developers, but they didn't anticipate it being used in the manner that it is being used.
Okay.
The example I always think of is Melee. Super Smash Bros. Melee has wave dashing is a thing that you can do. If you'd air dodge into the ground, you slide. It ends up becoming a good method of like movement in that game.
Yeah.
And all of the like pro players use wave dashing to.
Yeah, according to whenever I hear anyone talking about Melee, it's the only way to move in that game.
Pretty a lot of it is. I think walking like they've tried to make walking more useful as they play it more because everything expands. That game is 12 years old, 13, 14 years old. I don't know. Very old.
Don't look up the real number, Steven. It will make you sad.
Okay, cool. The 14 is already anyway. Yeah. So like that game has been out for a long time, and so like they're constantly trying to increase the capabilities of their play.
Yeah.
Wave dashing it's not a glitch because like that is a consequence of how the game works. Like air dodging into the ground is just a consequence of how the physics engine in Melee works.
Right.
And how, you can just air dodge in any direction.
So these are like promoted edge cases.
Exactly, yeah. And so effectively, it is an intentional thing that the developers put into the game. But they didn't, and I think there was like an interview where Sakurai talked about the wave dashing as a mechanic. They're like, oh yeah, we knew what this thing was. They didn't expect it to be as used as much as it is, but like we knew what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, that's an example of that. Whereas glitches are like things that are a consequence of the things that developers put into the game, but like are not intentional.
Yeah.
So like,
right, clipping through a wall or whatever.
Yeah, clipping through a wall and things like that. That's something that they didn't. I hope they didn't intend.
Right.
Or maybe they
wall
did.
Jumping in the first Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Those kinds of things. And so I think it's important to differentiate them because like glitches are things that like developers are not prepared for, and arguably, unless it like improves the game. It's not something, it's not something that like we probably want to get rid of those in patches because we have that ability now in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
But like exploits, I think, arguably, unless it's breaking things, maybe they could be good for a game or something. I that's something I kind of want to talk about.
Sure.
So
yeah.
it sounds like the way that you're describing it is, if you were just looking at the code, maybe you wouldn't be able to tell.
Yeah.
But an exploit is a known behavior that players are using in a way that developers did not intend or did not anticipate.
Yes.
Okay. To their own advantage, to the player's own advantage in the game.
Right.
And a glitch, players will still use it to their own advantage of the game, but the developer would look at it and be like, oh no, that's broken.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
And these are not technical definitions, really.
No.
Right?
These are kind of definitions.
Because you could come up with some things that are like, I mean, they're glitches, but the program still allows it, so it's not actually broken.
Right. Well, yeah.
The executable is still running correctly.
Yeah.
It's just, but then an exploit is more like, it's something that a developer might feel uncomfortable patching away.
Well, so
or it might ruin a bunch of other mechanics.
Yes. So another example of an exploit, and I think this is common in some of the older games. If you go to a store in the game and you buy this object, it's worth 10 coins or something when you buy it. But if you go to another store in the game and you sell that object, you get 15 coins back.
Oh, yeah.
So like you can buy a bunch of them here and sell them in another place.
Right.
That is an exploit, and then it is intentional. The developers put those mechanics in there, but maybe they didn't anticipate people literally buying billions of soda cans and bringing them over to this other town.
Right. It's like, this isn't a problem when people are behaving
in the way we expect.
In maybe a normal way, perhaps, a not goofy way. But it turns out humans are goofy. So, and then exploits are born.
Yeah. Well, then the question is when you say that the developers didn't expect or didn't intend for a glitch with exploits, should they have seen it coming? Because it's not what they wanted.
Odds are they probably did see it coming when they were like, you know what, this game's pretty good. We don't need to worry about it. We're just going to send it out anyways. Okay. Or they were just, or maybe they really just didn't expect players to like buy all of these things and, then go to this whole new area and sell all these things to make so much money off of it or whatever. Yeah.
I'm just putting myself in the mind of a developer where players find one of these exploits and it becomes the core principle to the meta of the game.
Yeah.
Like, at a certain point, the death of the author or whatever. But like at a certain point, as the game developer, I would be like, I didn't want that.
Yeah.
But then and I have the power to do something about it. But everyone's going to be mad.
Exactly, and that's what I want to talk about. Like because I think that like and I see this in a lot of like speedrunning events and things like that. Like sometimes they will have developers on the show as they're like speedrunning and breaking the games or whatever else. And sometimes the developers are like, oh no, we should have broken that. Or we should have fixed that before. We didn't notice that. I'm shocked that this is a thing that exists.
Yeah.
Other times developers are like, oh yeah, we knew that was in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they never fix it. Or I've also heard stories where like the speedrunning community will like find this thing and then the developers will patch it. But then like the speedrunning community was like, hey, can you put this back in or put it in another patch or something or give us the old patch or something? And then they're like, yeah, sure. And then they do it. They're saying like this is a problem, and then developers and then the speedrunning community is like, please don't fix this thing. We use it for this. In most players, casual players won't notice it.
Right. It doesn't hurt most people, but there's a community formed around it. So why mess with them?
Yeah. Like so like I find that really interesting because it can go in so many. I guess it goes back to like storytelling too, in a way, like thing, or you're trying to give the player a certain experience, and this exploit. This intended but unintended thing that is in the game, you could fix it, but should you fix it? Is it actually going to help the game? Is it actually a problem? Like, are most people going to even notice this thing?
Yeah,
like that kind of stuff.
As you're talking through this, the MDA framework is helping me understand the implications of this, because basically what you're saying is you have an intentional mechanic, but an unintentional dynamic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Whereas a glitch is an unintended mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Well.
Please, it worked so well, Stephen.
I know it did.
It was so nice and it had a little bow on it.
That's not technically correct.
All right. Well,
it's just that like how Mark was describing. We are like all of it. You programmed all of this stuff in. It all works.
Yeah.
But like, there's just a thing in there that you didn't want to be a thing in there, and maybe you tried to fix it and it didn't work or whatever. But like, it's still a thing that you didn't want in there, and it's a glitch.
So I was technically correct.
The best kind of correct.
Because I was listening to Ellen, and I'm like, Ellen makes more sense than I made.
Maybe. You're all right. We're all winners here. Okay.
It goes back to definition of done. So get Eric on the show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of telling. Is like there's a lot of language to use to describe these things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And even at the beginning, where I was like, "What are you talking about? What is that?"
Yeah.
And I was trying to find my way to your understanding of it. I think that is really interesting. And then that's fine and all well and good if you want to like have an outline for a podcast or you want to write a paper on such a topic.
Yeah.
But then what happens when your game meets a community? Then what language do you use versus what language do they use to describe these things?
Yeah.
So that I want to ask you about that because you're familiar with enough of these communities that have this meta that are formed around these kinds of exploits.
Yeah.
How and developers tend to have a sort of a love-hate relationship with this sort of thing, and they can benefit from it in great ways.
Yeah.
Is that a common difficulty of like either party trying to make the other one understand what's good or bad about these things in a particular context? Or do people kind of just get by?
Can you rephrase that question?
I don't know that I can.
Well, think about it through the MDA framework.
That doesn't help me, apparently.
Oh, I was just throwing it out there in case.
I mean, basically just presenting the challenge of like, okay, I've made a game.
Yeah.
Players are using it in a way I didn't intend.
Right.
They don't realize that's the case.
Yeah.
Or they're so excited about that. My feelings are X, Y, or Z.
Sure. Okay.
I need to find a way to explain myself that I want to patch this out for this reason, or I need them to explain to me why I shouldn't patch it out.
Oh, okay.
Then you start talking about the language of like what's a bug and what's not.
Okay, now I definitely see how you're coming from, and this like goes into like patches and things too.
Yeah.
Because like these are things that like the civilization community. A lot of people complain about certain civilizations not being as powerful as other civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time sometimes
that happens in real life too.
It does. Yes. And sometimes, people are talking about it from an aspect of like multiplayer, because like if you're playing a certain civ and that civ is just not as good in a multiplayer scenario, then like it feels like you're just going to have a worse time than other players who are playing more powerful civs in that kind of a scenario.
Right.
And civilization is kind of weird too, because like you can control all of the rules and you can kind of make somebody more powerful than another civilization, regardless of like how their actual balance level is.
You mean through gameplay or through modding?
No, not through modding, through gameplay, through the game systems themselves. Like, you can change the maps or something.
Yeah.
If you're a naval civ, you want more water.
Yeah, there's ultimately too many variables for anyone to even understand what more powerful means.
That does not stop people from arguing about it, though. And so, I think, like, with Civilization, like, a lot of the time, the developers, like, tend to pay attention to what the community is saying about things, and I think there's a couple of people who are, like, more prolific in the scene, who will like chat with other people who play the game a lot and stuff. I don't know. They sometimes explain it. Like they'll just, I think the way that Civilization does it is they say, we heard you. We're going to make this civilization do 50% more damage in this scenario or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I hope not, because that's ridiculous. But, but they don't really like, they don't jump into a forum and say, this is the reason why we did this and detail a whole thing.
Right.
Whereas, like,
there's a distance you need to maintain.
But when I was in college, I was really interested in reading about League of Legends and how like they went into the development of the the characters and stuff, and why they decided to make patches and things they did. They actually went into a lot of detail on the forums to describe why they were doing these things. And people just complained to them about them. Eventually, they created a distance between developers and players, partly because, it's just a lot of stress and people just, gamers aren't the greatest at expressing themselves when they're angry about stuff. But also partly because like you kind of, as a developer, you have a better understanding of all of the different things that go into these characters and all the different things that go into the mechanics and in the balance of all of these things. So what is and what shouldn't be part of the game, or at the very least, you have a better understanding of what you want to be in the game or not.
What your intentions were.
Exactly. Yeah. So and as players, you have your own motivations. Like, I don't know, like if in Super Smash Bros., I'm always a Kirby main. I want Kirby to be good because I like playing Kirby. If like the developer of Super Smash Brothers is like, well, Kirby's too good in this game, we're gonna need to change a bunch of stuff. Me as a player, I'll be like, what? I like Kirby. Why you gotta change Kirby? But like, as a developer, you're like, I gotta think about all of the other characters in the game, and I need to make sure that all of these things make sense. If Kirby's got some exploit where like when you copy someone's ability, it's 3 times more powerful than it should be, and it's causing Kirby's like metagame to stagnate, and it's causing everybody to focus on playing Kirby, and like you have to figure out ways to fight against Kirby. That becomes bad for the game.
Yeah. You say that, but an all Kirby fighting game sounds okay.
There is an all Kirby fighting game. They have to balance that too.
Yeah. But also, I joke, but like there are other reasons you play as Kirby.
Well, yeah, right.
Because you like the character, and I always thought that's interesting because that's how casual players play Smash, is they pick their favorite character. But even the high level players, there's a little bit of that motivation.
Oh, of course,
right? And so that's very difficult when it comes to discussions about balance and stuff. Like, does that make you more resistant to nerfing a character you love because you're just going to play as them anyway, or does it make you more upset because you're going to play that character anyway, so you can't? Do you know what I mean? Oh man, we should talk about nerfing and buffing. Did we talk about that before? We I don't
should
know.
do that because that's really fun.
You can go look through the archives at nicegames.club/feedback.
No, it's just nicegames.club.
Oh, well, you can give us feedback about how many times we've mentioned this by going to the URL I just said.
Yes.
I'm on URL autopilot right now.
There's a lot of times, like, I read this a lot, and it actually frustrates me. When people are talking about like balanced things, they're like, "Boy, I wish that this character could do more stuff." And then other people are complaining, "Oh, this character just does too many things."
Mhm.
A lot of times, people will say that like, "I'd rather than buff all of the weak characters and not nerf any of the good characters."
Mhm.
And like, when there's 20 some characters in your game, it makes a lot more sense to nerf like ridiculously overpowered characters versus buffing 24 other characters.
Exactly.
Because like that can cause a whole bunch of other problems that you can't that are hard to anticipate.
This is a case where like not being so detailed in your patch notes would be kind of helpful, but especially for a community like Smash, they're like counting frames and everything, so it's like nothing's going to slip by them. And so maybe having those details is a way for them so they don't have to do the detective work or come to wrong conclusions. So yeah, it's as a developer, it's kind of tough to think about that communication angle.
Yeah, that's an aspect of it too. So like,
because you kind of want everyone just to chill and play your game, but you also want you appreciate that they care so much.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I wanted to bring this topic up, because like these kinds of things are, and it's not even necessarily just in a multiplayer setting; it can be in a single player setting too. These kinds of things can affect the game and how people approach the game in a way that can be detrimental to the experience that players are because like players want to, get this thing done. And they're not necessarily, because they're not the developers, so they don't know what the intent is. They just want to make sure that the game, they are able to complete the game or whatever else. So they will actively do things that will make their experience worse just because it seems like a benefit for them at the time. And so it's not on the player's fault that this exploit is a thing, whatever exploit that is. But I guess as developers, we need to figure out whether or not this is something that we want to keep in the game because it is beneficial. Because sometimes exploits actually end up helping the game in ways that they didn't anticipate, like with wave dashing. It gives players an avenue to new movement abilities and stuff, and it makes the game flashier. You kind of have to balance that and figure out what it is before you make rash decisions. It's rough.
Game development is hard.
Yep, that's I've heard that a few times.
That's like a sad but perennial note to go out on, probably.
Yeah, we might have done that a few times already.
Yeah, you can always check the archives to be sure.
NiceGames.club.
That's our show. Check out our website. It's nicegames.club if you didn't catch it the first 50 times. For show notes and links to resources on today's topics. And yeah, previous episode stuff. Yep. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode, maybe. And on on our programming in general, definitely. Go to, you guessed it, nicegames.club/feedback to tell us what you think. You can also get in touch with us on Twitter at nicegamesclub, where Dale tweets about game dev resources and playdate peripherals. Ooh. Or you can email us through contact@nicegames.club. Want to support the show? Great. There are so many ways. You can give us a review on your favorite podcast app. You can tell your friends about your favorite episodes. And you can join us on Discord by visiting nicegames.club/Discord. Lots of cool chats happening all the time over there. And we are also on Patreon. As a patron of the show, you'll enjoy bonus content, extra jokes, and more. Probably not a ton more mentions of the website. But you can sign up at a different website, patreon.com/nicegamesclub.
So until we start again, remember to
play nice
and make nice. First Street South in the sizzling city of Minneapolis. This is sorry.
What is this, Ellen?
This is Nice Games Club.
Nice Games Club. This is Nice Games Club, the show where nice game devs talk gaming and game development.
Okay, well, let's take two on that
one. Let's start.
This Father's Day, let Dad loose at Lowe's. He's never seen a to-do list he couldn't tackle, and we have all the power tools and outdoor power equipment he needs. Choose from more than 50 Cobalt 24-volt Max tools, including the Cobalt 24-volt Max brushless drill kit. Was $159, and now you can gift it for just $89. Plus, Dad can shop Lowe's in-store, online, or through our app. Lowe's, the perfect gift for Dad. Offer valid through 6/23 while supplies last, U.S. only.